Hello, everybody, and welcome to Holden's 11. Today, my special guest, music composer and writer, Sterling R. Jackson. Thrilled to have you, Sterling. Thanks for coming.
What's up, man? It's good to be here.
I am so excited to see you, and I cannot wait to talk about today's topic. Today's topic is the top 11 iconic movie themes. One of the things about this list, we always have a difficult time sort of managing the integrity of these lists. So for today's purposes, this will be instrumental themes that are well known throughout American culture.
Yeah.
So without further delay, let's launch right into them. We can start talking about these. Number 11, Rocky from 1976 by Bill Conti.
So now we came up with some ways here where we want to play a little bit of the song so that everybody kind of remembers it. And some of these, that you picked, I'm definitely not completely like, oh yeah, so I pulled some of these up, and I'll continue pulling them up. But here we got good old Rocky. See if you remember this one.
It's a great jam.
Instantly memorable. When you mentioned it on the list, I was like, I don't know if I remember that, and then I remembered the horns.
Yeah. And
every time I run up steps, I should
sort of synonymous with victory, right? And that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you. As a musician, what do you think it is about this theme that makes it synonymous with victory?
I knew these kind of questions were going to come up, and so writing music for me, any kind of music, everything is based on feeling. And I'm an untrained musician, so I've never had any lessons, and I do everything by ear. So it's even more synonymous with, how does it make you feel? And it's funny, like having horns like that instantly kind of sounds victorious, right away. Especially if you put a little bit of a reverb and you move them back in the back. You can play a lot of different notes and it'll sound like the king is coming down the corridor. It's just,
right.
It always kind of has that feeling of like royal kind of victory, or I don't know, just it has a definite quality about it that kind of makes you go like, oh, this is intense. But I don't know. It's also the funny thing. If you listen to more of this, you'll hear how 80s it is. Because my God, It's got a bass in there.
Yeah, it's almost kind of disco, right? It's got a little bit of a a little bit of a disco beat.
And it's kind of corny.
Yeah, it is a little corny. I was in Philadelphia a couple of years ago, and have you ever visited the steps there where he jogs up and there's the statue of Rocky? Yep. It's a cool statue, and it's Sylvester Stallone with his hands raised in victory. And I swear, when you look at the statue, you can almost hear the music, right?
Oh, yeah. It's kind of a shame in our culture that we would look up to somebody like that who fought somebody, fakely on a screen, and we don't have any actual heroes. Like, this person actually accomplished something. Isn't that great? You don't think about him accomplishing that goal. It's like, nope, we got some guy that's like, hey, Adrian, my made-up wife in this film.
Yeah. A fairly decent movie, all things, looking at it retrospectively. He was sort of the underdog and came back against these terrible odds. But a lot of us forget now that in the movie he didn't actually win the fight, right? It was a split decision. It was only that he did not lose the fight was the theme of the movie.
Yeah.
So, but he didn't go home with a belt or anything like that. So, but firmly a part of the American cultural zeitgeist. So let's move on to number 10. When we make these lists, I always want to have a couple that are a little bit ringers, right? Like something that's a little bit lesser known. And we like to talk about the things that we love. And we feel that there's enough negativity on the internet, and there's enough channels of everybody gassing on about how much they hate the latest thing. So let's talk about the things that we love. And ever since I first saw number 10, I loved it. And this is Edward Scissorhands, the theme from 1990 by composer Danny Elfman. You have a clip of that one?
This is one that I didn't know very well. Then when you hear it, you definitely kind of remember it somewhere, and it's definitely very feeling based as well. I know that everything can be feeling based, but it's definitely got some kind of a special quality to it that instantly takes you to all these different places. And the cover here that I'm looking at, which I can't share that, but just has snow and has Edward Scissorhands Johnny on the side and everything. It's just it's just perfectly laced with the music. So see if you remember this one. Can't really turn it up any louder.
perfect.
Those bells, dude.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? That's Danny Elfman for you. And I tell you, he almost made this list a second time. He was also the composer of the well, he works with Tim Burton a lot. Are you a Tim Burton fan?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And he also did, of course, well, many of the movies, but the big one for him was Batman with Michael Keaton. And, that's a terrific one too. But, I had to pick really just the one for the purposes of the list. And the thing I liked about Edward Scissorhands, it's kind of sad and beautiful, right? And I think that so many elements of the script and the character and the music were just intertwined so perfectly. And I think that's why that one sort of lives on.
Well, not to mention, man, when you take something so completely bananas, weird, and then you still can pull at people's heartstrings, like you're doing something right. Not only with the cinematography and just everything, but and the acting, of course, but when you're taking something so ridiculous, and then people are like, "Poor Edward, he's
Yeah.
got those scissor hands." Like, it's, it's so it's so amazing. But yeah, when you hear this, you completely can go to another place, and that's what music's supposed to do. So wonderful. It's not one of the themes that really sticks out, that you kind of remember, but yeah, it's definitely excellent. So
Worthy of inclusion on our list today.
indeed, sir.
Just a quick aside, there's also some genius casting in that movie. Remember, Vincent Price was the mad scientist who was trying to build Edward, and he's kind of like a villainous character actor. He was in all those B horror movies from the 50s and early 60s, and I just love that guy. So
Let me
well
look him
done.
up.
Well
I
done on the
haven't.
casting.
Yeah, I haven't seen this movie in a really long time. Vincent Price, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah, as
yeah.
soon as you see him, you go, "Oh yeah, that guy, man, that guy." So we'll make another list of the top horror actors and make sure that he gets a spot.
Okay.
So in our next position here, I wanted to go back a couple of years, and one of the things we want to make sure that we include theme songs that when you hear them, maybe you don't even necessarily remember the movie, but
Yeah.
it's been parodied so many times and homaged so many times that you instantly can remember the song and you can kind of get a feel of what the tone of the movie was. And this next one, number 9, the theme of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That's
Now,
from 1968, going back a few years.
yeah, I've never seen it. I just finished my first film score, and somebody had referenced it for a scene, and I had to look it up, and I was like, oh, okay, like I know what they're doing here, and this must be really synonymous with the westerns and the whole
Right.
thing. But I didn't know it, and then you're like, oh yeah, you'll know it, and then all you had to do was go, and you're like, oh okay. But you're right. I mean, that is so ridiculous that somebody could, and that's kind of I guess part of the theme here is like if you can whistle a couple notes like that,
Right.
and people are like, oh yeah, I know that. That's pretty powerful to write something that's that memorable. So anyway,
Well,
here
yeah, go ahead.
I'll shut up and play it. So might have to skip ahead a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, man. Once again,
Absolutely. And I just want to quick mention the composer there. He's Ennio Morricone. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. And that was actually a pretty popular song back in 1968. It even reached number 4 on the Billboard pop charts, which that says a lot too. Because if you think about it, the other songs in 1968 did not sound like that. So, and not to mention, to tie into what you so eloquently put it, which is, something is that synonymous with its genre. And in
Yeah.
this case, that was almost 60 years ago, and people still use that to reference Westerns. I was going to say most people probably know it because it's in things like Family Guy, The Simpsons, stuff like that. It's what they use to represent Westerns, and probably
Yeah,
couldn't have done much of a better job.
yeah. I mean, once again, another one of those things where it teleports you exactly there, and you can think about sand and just the heat. It's even synonymous with scenes where it's kind of dry and there's heat. When you
Right.
hear, like you hear that, it's that. It's that
or
ingrained now.
any kind of scene where there's about to be a fight of some kind.
Yeah, but it's also worth mentioning that, if that was on the pop charts or on the charts way back then, that, people celebrated music and stuff like that so much back then compared to the way we do now, that people probably liked hearing it just because of how much they celebrated Clint Eastwood and the film and how fun it was and how much it was just amazing. But now things are just gone in the blink of an eye, and they'd be like, oh yeah, that was the movie that came out like 2 weeks ago.
Right. We consume media as a culture at a much faster pace than
Yeah.
a typical movie viewer from 1968 would have.
Yeah. So now the kind of thing wouldn't last as long. But still, like I said, people probably liked hearing it over and over again because they're like, oh yeah, that was awesome. Do you remember that part?
Well, praise Allah, we now have a way to commemorate these songs, which is by including them on our top 11 list.
Obviously, yes.
So moving on to number 6. And again, this one's a little bit more obscure, but I think that many people would hear this and they would instantly recognize the subject matter, which in this case, the subject matter is gangsters. And I'm a sucker for a gangster story. I love this type of movie. And number 6 on our top 11 list is the theme from The Godfather from 1972.
We skipped 2 there, Timmy, old boy. We skipped Lord of the Rings. We skipped James Bond.
Well, hold on. Did I? Well, let's.
Good, Bad, and Ugly, and then we go to Lord of the Rings.
Okay. Oh yeah, I got my numbers out of order. Let's do. I'll edit that part out here. Stop. Ready? Okay. The next one on our list, we'll move right forward to number 8. That's Lord of the Rings from 2001 by Howard Shore.
All right. So this song is a little bit more expansive, but and it plays itself through the film in all kinds of different ways, but really, really wonderful. And this is kind of the most iconic part that people tend to remember. So.
Incredible.
Once again, you got those horns that
yeah.
People climbing mountains and stuff. We're gonna triumph. We're gonna climb.
What an incredible composition by Howard Shore there. And it's worth noting, of course, that he won the Oscar for his score for Lord of the Rings.
As well he should. That music.
Yeah, and I like to say too, the thing about Howard Shore, his name is kind of synonymous with musical score composing, and he has a net worth of something like $300 million, which is just incredible, right? When you think about, the success of these songs that are such a timeless composition. And, there's no way to hear that and not instantly think, wow, this is going to be a badass movie. I totally got to check it out,
Yeah, absolutely. I know that when I was growing up, hearing music like that, especially in Lord of the Rings, influenced the kind of music that I wanted to write, the kind of music I still want to write. I remember even explaining a couple of times when people are like, what kind of music do you create? What kind of music do you want to create? And even linking up with friends or people that I wanted to write with, I was like, I want to write like theme score type stuff mixed with like rock music and things like that, just epic stuff. And I was definitely relating to the Lord of the Rings stuff because it was just so beautiful. And I don't know, it's definitely still ingrained in the way I like to write and the things I think about. So
Sure. And it does such a terrific job of sort of emulating these epic scenes that you're about to see also, which is, we played the main theme, which is kind of one of the more well-known ones, but also the theme from Mordor. It's sort of his Empire type theme, and it's equally kick-ass.
Dun, 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 dun.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And also so rhythmic. I really dig his sort of dystopian rhythm section that he has going on during that part.
There's an absolute earthy primal type of feel to him. So I got to make sure I have some of these pulled up. So we had the Good, the Bad, and Ugly. We got Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Next we got number 7. This is another one which has been around for 60 years and still going strong. And a lot of that is primarily due to video game culture, I think. But number 7 on our list is the theme from James Bond.
So one of those ones that you remember pretty easily, sticks in your mind. So it's definitely a great one for the list. So I think we start a little bit slower.
Yeah, that one has quite a build up.
Everybody knows. It's still wonderful. Building some tension. Let's go ahead.
Yeah. What a great theme song.
All those horns. I'd talk over it, but since I'm a musician, it's worth noting that with my partially autistic brain, that I can't have music playing and then communicate at the same time. Or
Concentrate, sure, yeah, I get it. That one's from 1962, was the first time it was written by a composer by the name of Monty Norman. And here it is, 2022, right? And people still know, if you go, da-da, da-da, da-da-da, hey, James Bond, man. It's like, it lived on. And it's one of those things. I always wondered, does a guy back then know that, hey, this theme's gonna live forever, man. People are gonna know it till which I gotta guess Monty Norman has long since passed.
Yeah, it's one of those funny things where, people that interview musicians always are talking to them like, did you know you were writing a hit when you wrote this song? Did you know that that was going to be a thing? But you never really get to hear from film composers because they're kind of like the film writers where they're hidden behind the scenes, which is still very
Right.
stupid and odd. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it would be really wonderful to know when they write these things, if they could stick around. Because once again, we can all remember song lyrics and we can all remember certain songs, but to remember a thing like that's ridiculously specific.
Right. And what
we're talking, we're talking about universal appeal too, like across the world. If you went, somebody in Japan might know, somebody in Mongolia might know, like
somebody in China, they very likely would know. And it's one of the most and of course, some of for the purposes of our list here, we tried to pick the most iconic ones, but realistically, there's many that have done this and they've held on for 50 or 60 years. And I've always said about music, and I know you're the same way, the thing that's funny about music is it can sort of unlock the era of the time that you first heard it. And what I mean by that is when you think about, man, the first time I heard this song, and you can remember the girl that you were with, and you can remember the leaves on the trees changing color, and you can remember how we walked home after having, like, it unlocks so many memories. And the power of music is really unlike any other power, in my opinion. And I would say that out of all the memory triggers, music, for me anyway, is the strongest.
Yeah, man, me too. It's in there. And once again, it's something that's still changing in our culture, and we're not sure how it's gonna keep evolving and stuff. But I know that people like you and I that are a little bit older, that grew up with music dominating so much of our life and everything, it's powerful stuff.
Yeah, it really is.
It's much more powerful than the TikToks of the world. And
man, don't disparage TikTok on here. That might be the next thing we got to try. Like all creators, and I don't mean to speak for you. Feel free to chime in. Possibly you disagree with me, but we have to try and think of new and inventive ways to find our audience and to create meaningful engagement. And that's one of the reasons why people like you and I have turned to YouTube channels and a somewhat unconventional approach to try and reach our fans. And in my case, at the end of the day, I'm a writer. I am a songwriter, and we'll talk a little bit about what you and I do together. But the main thing we're trying to do in both of our cases is to try and engage our fans with some form of meaningful content. So what the answer is, look, I don't know, but I do kind of think that Facebook is on the way out, and it's like we can remember long enough. Remember when MySpace was the biggest thing on the planet, right? Well, certainly nothing's going to dethrone MySpace. Well,
yeah, as we talked about that a little bit before, it's a strange thing because I remember when Facebook started creeping in and people started signing up for that. And then I remember seeing it and it was all kind of blank and you couldn't customize everything. And I was like, well, I don't like that. It's not a representation of who I am. And then sure enough, people went so far with customizations that you could barely look at their page without it blinking lights and music playing. And you were kind of like, people just didn't like it anymore. So you never can tell what's going to happen. But yeah,
you never can tell.
Went down in flames really fast.
It really did, man. And when you think about, if you would have guessed and said, well, Facebook is going to totally take the place of MySpace, we would have said, absolutely not. Are you kidding? Because MySpace had the customization and it had the musical capability and really some pretty great features looking back on it. But I guess it's like anything else, social media in particular can be very unpredictable.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say too, which is very odd, is the ability to continue to keep up with the times, which is very, very quick and very, very rapid changes. And if you remember, Vine used to be a
Mm,
really big thing where you made,
yeah,
what was it, a minute? You had a minute to go, or was it 30 seconds? And people were blowing up and getting really popular, and then
right,
just nothing, just
right. Yep.
and then another thing comes forward and says, "Hey, here's a platform you can make a minute-long video." And you're like, "We just did
Yeah, yeah,
what
great point.
the hell?" And people are, blowing up on that, and to the point where it's ridiculous. And like, we could go on forever about it. But there's people that are doing silly, goofy content. And then I went to the mall the other day, and I saw one of those people that makes funny content as a model in a store for clothing, and I was like, "What the hell? How does that translate?" And these people just have some level of fame that they're like, "Here, put on our clothing," and
Right.
so it's crazy. Anyway, what do
Yeah,
you got?
so we'll circle back around to number 6, and I had almost screwed up the order of this, and potentially I might edit that out, but maybe I won't because I do like to think that we are real people, and perhaps it is more interesting, as you said, to see us sort of warts and all. But one of my weaknesses has always been gangster movies, and I love them. They're almost you almost can't really make a gangster movie that I won't like in some way. But one of the all-time classics, I think most people would agree, is our number 6 iconic movie theme song, which is the theme from The Godfather. That's from 1972, with the composed by Nino Rota. So I think some people would say, "Well, I don't really remember that theme," but when you hear it, most people would go, "Oh yeah, that one." Any chance you got a clip of that?
Yeah, and looking at this clip, which is, posted by some random person, 55 million views. So people remember.
Right.
It's those strings there. Oh, that's great.
That's beautiful.
And there's the romantic part, those notes right there.
Right. It is romantic. I'll give you a little bit of trivia about that. You mentioned that you sense the romantic nature of it, and that's most people would probably say right there, well, that's a gangster theme song. But you quickly perceived, hey, that's a romantic song. And a lot of people don't know, I myself didn't, that song actually has a title. It's called Speak Softly, Love.
I did not know.
Wow. And it's so fitting, right? But to guys like me and you, the thing you think of is somebody's about to be whacked.
Well, one of the all-time best movies, I think people would agree that it's a lot of people's favorite films, or at least
Yeah,
it's one of their top films. Well, I won't even get into it because then people get pissed off if I tell like how many of the films I've seen or not seen. You didn't see The Godfather? I did watch most of it. Not something I can look. I'll put it this way. When something is very, very well done and very, very realistic and dramatic, and people are getting shot and killed, sometimes my little sensitive heart can't take it.
right,
And in
right.
this case, I remember that film and trying to get through it, and it's just some of the realness with it and stuff was shockingly difficult for me to watch.
Sure, sure.
And I remember, him hiding the gun in the bathroom and
Oh yeah,
and all this, and
great
just
scene.
as we went on, it was just hard for me to deal with. So never completely finished it, but the music, um, romantic, Italian, so many great things there, and of course, seeing the picture of Marlon Brando and the things he put in so he could talk like this.
Right,
It's
right.
just wonderful, just wonderful.
And I also should mention too, it's one of the rare instances where the sequel was better received than the first movie, which is The Godfather 2. And the reason why I kind of dug that one, first of all, you look at it and it's like the who's who of everybody that became these titans of the acting industry. You got Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, James Caan. It's amazing. But it also kind of went back and it showed them as early immigrants in the 20s, I guess that is. Maybe it's the 1910s and the 1920s, and sort of illustrated how and why they turned to a life of crime. And that's the part that I really sort of dug. But man, I tell you, as movie theme songs go, they don't get much more iconic than that one.
Yeah, and they don't, once again, to make you feel so much from listening to it, and to listen to it and have you just pull in your mind all those characters and everything and what they were going through. So it's, once again, it's very, 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 very well done, and I love it.
Great
So
pick. All right,
yeah,
well, let's change it up a little bit. I got number 5 on the burner here, and
quite a
one of the
different.
things it occurred to me as I was making this list, and I bet some viewers will chime in about this, which is I didn't have too many scary ones. And man, there has been some just terrific scary films, and the scary film, that's got to be a tough one to be a composer for. And I'll ask your opinion about that. I know you've worked on some material like that because you want the theme to be scary, right? But it can't necessarily overpower the scene. And occasionally, horror movies, I think, when they have a really sort of in your face kind of theme, it kind of overpowers the horror a little bit. So, without further delay, we'll launch right into number 5, which my pick here was the theme from The Exorcist.
Hopefully, I pulled up the right one here, but we gotta skip an ad.
That's okay. This is the one called Tubular Bells by the composer Mike Oldfield. That's from
Yeah.
1973.
And you reminded me of this one, and once again, another one that I was like, oh, I speaking of my big sensitive heart, never saw The Exorcist. Still don't know if I really want to see it. When people are like, I want to sit down and have a cinematic adventure and get some popcorn and whatever, I do not think of being stressed the hell out.
It's yeah, yeah.
So,
Honestly, potentially still the scariest movie ever. And
yeah,
I'm not particularly a religious guy, so please don't take from this that I'm a religious guy. But very few movies nail it to the extent of, I'm not particularly afraid of demons in the sense of Catholic mythology.
yeah,
But I was raised Catholic, and I will tell you that I was raised Catholic just enough to where The Exorcist terrifies me.
yeah,
And and everybody's sort of seen the iconic scenes of the possessed girl and vomiting the pea soup and
yeah,
her
yeah.
head spinning around backwards, and even some of them are pretty graphic. I won't go into that here, but it's something that you leave the theater and you're like, "Oh my god, what did I just see?" Right? And of
Yeah.
course, Mike Oldfield wrote this theme for it, which when you hear even the first couple of bells ringing, to me, it's chilling.
Yeah, that's what when I played it, because I didn't know it, I was like, "Oh, I do know this," because it's just got such a here, I'll shut up and play it.
Yeah,
Ah,
it's spooky.
yeah, we'll keep going here.
All right, now
I wanted to
let
make
me
sure.
ask you a composing question, and I really want to hear your answer to this. So, as maybe some of our viewers don't know, you're very active in music composing and scoring films, and more experience with this than probably the average musician might have. So, what do you think makes a composition more spooky than, say, an average composition? And what I mean by that, like the easy answer is, oh, it's got a minor key or something like that, but it's got to be more than that, right?
Hmm. Um, yeah, I mean, somebody that went to one of these fancy music schools might be able to answer it, and that's something I've always deterred away from because it takes the magic of music away from me when somebody would just answer like, "Oh, it's got a ninth in it," and when you play ninths and you put them like this,
Right.
I don't care about stuff like that because once again, like if you're trying to be formulaic, you're taking all the specialness out of writing in the first place. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I don't really know how to answer it other than just tapping into those feelings or tapping into certain instruments and the way they make you feel. I will say that it's much easier to create something ugly than it is beautiful.
Hmm.
A lot of people could sit down and put something together in terms of horror films, and a lot of people could sit down and put something together for music for a horror film because it's much easier to create something that's just not really that pleasing.
Right, right,
That
right.
is something beautiful, and what you have displayed here is something that's actually beautiful but very sad and just kind of makes you feel kind of uneasy.
Unsettled, right. And thanks for that really honest and compelling answer. I think that I consider myself a songwriter as well, and while your own talent dwarfs mine, I will say that the element of having the feel included into the composition has very little to do with the ninths and the circle of fourths, and it's everything to do with letting it take you to a place that maybe you wouldn't have seen without that theme playing. And the whole thing, when it all blends together, it sort of creates an experience that is it's almost unearthly, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and these things are definitely ingrained. There's something to be said about our DNA and the history of our DNA, and we do have these memories that are not completely ours, that are part of a centered one kind of cult consciousness type of thing, whatever you believe. So these things tend to light up in our brain when we hear them, and we have memories of certain places and certain, if I listen to this song, for example, I think about it takes me to an outside place. It takes me to cold place, like cold weather. I think about stone and streets. There's a lot of imagery that comes up. And
Mm-hmm.
those aren't my memories, and they're not from necessarily a film. They could be, but they're all part of this one connectedness that we all have. So there's
Yeah.
something to be said about that. Same thing with, what makes horns and victory. We didn't grow up when they're like, announcing King Richard.
Right. That's you said that in a perfect way, and that's really where I was kind of going with my question. Like, I've never been to a king's coronation,
Yeah.
So why is it that the horns sort of suggest that imagery? And I think you really said it a great way, and that apparently there's some kind of wiring, I guess, to our collective DNA that, maybe a type of species memory of an older time, I guess.
Yeah,
It,
it's part of our evolution. It's part of what keeps us alive. It's part of us, remembering when you hear this sound. In terms of an animalistic thing, in terms of our evolution, if we were more animally driven or more instinct driven, it's supposed to help us to navigate the landscape of safety and danger and things like that. If when I smell that smell, it reminds me that
yeah,
there's something coming after me from over
yeah,
there.
yeah, sure.
This little noise over here could be a snake, etc. It's supposed to be kind of that, but we're more evolved, so we get to have these wonderful experiences. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah, yeah.
my mic stand. I have all this amazing, beautiful equipment that costs so much money, and then I have a mic stand, so the whole time that we're talking, it just keeps. So you see me keep reaching over. I keep trying to fix it, and I apologize for that.
Well, I get a lot of YouTube ads about precisely that content, about the rigidity of my mic stand. So maybe I could maybe I could make a couple of recommendations. But yeah, hey,
Yeah,
Sterling, I really appreciate your answer on that one. And that's something I'd really love to dive into that topic a little deeper. And that's something that when you talk about exactly why it is that certain forms of music evoke certain types of memories and emotions, it's difficult to quantify the science of it. Like, there must be some reason, but like when you sit and try and analyze it, it's a little bit takes the magic out of it. And I think you described it a really great way. It's a little bit like, if you saw the guy making the sausages, you probably wouldn't like sausage too much. So
yes, indeed.
maybe
I,
music is the
I
same way.
I know it firsthand too. I released a record in 2018, and it took me and my partner that I was writing it with about 4 years to finish. He went to music school, and he kind of gave up on music because he just didn't really care for it anymore. It really took the specialness out of it for him.
Yeah.
And when we started writing together, he would kind of get these highs and get on the same wavelength with me. And then he would keep backing himself up because he would logistically or methodically break down these things. And he'd be like, that's a very common chord progression. We should try to use something else. And I would always have to step in and be like, dude, just how does it make you feel? Like, does it
Yeah.
keep you in that pocket of the feeling? Because if you're trying to blatantly make something weird or different just because other people did or didn't do it, like, what the hell? You're just ruining it and making it strange. So you have to keep up with the way it makes you feel, because that's
Right.
why you're doing it in the first place. But yeah,
Yeah.
if you want to make something weird, go ahead and make it weird. Nobody will listen to it. There is a specialness and a connectedness of making things that people can relate to.
Hmm.
And then there's a specialness for musicians like you and I, where we might want to listen to Dream Theater because it's for that musical quality of the chaos of the things that these people are able to
Right.
do.
Yeah.
But
Well
it
said, man. Well said.
doesn't always make the best song.
Yeah. That reminds me of something. And first of all, I agree 100% with the way they said that. And I used to have a friend, and I used to tell him, first, let me rewind a little bit. I'm a musician, and I've played through bands over the years. And I can remember when I was much younger that one of the ideas as well, the complexity of the song and the speed at which you're playing it was one of the hallmarks of some of the music that we were making it. And
Yeah.
there is such a thing as making the song complex for the sake of complexity. It doesn't necessarily lend itself toward a better song. And I was talking to one of my buddies, and I can remember what it was, is I was insulting one of the songs he was listening to because I, of course, know everything, I think. And it was, as a matter of fact, I even remember the band. It was the Violent Femmes. Did you ever like them?
I know the name, don't remember any of the songs.
Yeah, I wasn't really a fan, but it would be fair to say they had pretty simple song structures. And I,
Right.
I said something, oh, well, these songs are oversimplified or something. And he turned to me and said, Tim, you got to keep in mind, it's like a chef preparing a dinner. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily taste better because it was difficult to prepare.
Yeah.
And I
Uh,
tell you, that was like a light bulb going on over my head. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking back to all the three-chord songs that became huge hits, right? And
yeah.
the truth is, sometimes the simpler the subject matter and the simpler the arrangement, maybe the more people will enjoy it. And there's something to be said for that.
Yeah. A lot of people like pizza. So sometimes you
Sure.
just got to make a pizza.
Well, man, that's a fascinating angle to our conversation. Like I say, I'd love to do a whole episode just about that. But for right now,
Yeah.
I'll circle back around. And one of the things you're going to notice as we get to the top of our list here, and I hope people will chime in the comments on their own picks, or if they would like to vociferously disagree with me, I'm okay with that too. But you're going to find as we get close to the top, this list is going to suddenly transform into what I call a John Williams love fest, and is never more prevalent here than in number 4, which is the theme from a little known movie. I don't think it was very popular at the time. It was about some dinosaur or something. It was called Jurassic Park. And that was from 1993. And that was, of course, there's many tremendous John Williams scores, but it'd be fair to say this one's one of my all-time favorites. I almost feel bad putting it at number 4.
Yeah, and it makes its way into all kinds of memes and all kinds of videos all the time because it means so much to people, and especially goobers like me that grew up like, I like dinosaurs.
Yeah, who
So,
doesn't? Who doesn't,
yeah.
right?
All right, here we go. I think we might have to get through the build-up of this to the point where everybody knows it. Let me skip ahead. All right. Here we go. There it is. Welcome to Jurassic Park.
You do that pretty well.
And that I actually had to look it up and found out that that's what David Attenborough's brother. David Attenborough, I love so very, very much. One of the greatest voices on the planet. And to find out that that was probably a little bit of where that wonderfulness came from. Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Yeah,
It's probably because he shares some of that wonderful voice DNA. So
yeah, sure.
yeah,
Super
but anyway,
interesting. Super interesting.
Yep,
And
yep.
it's like you sort of touched on it. Like there's a theme, and I'm sure if we analyze this down to its musical composition, there's some theoretical reason why this is so amazing. But the truth is, you hear that theme, and it represents, I'm about to see something amazing.
Yeah.
Da 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 da. Like, it doesn't even matter what the amazing thing is. It's going to be awesome.
Yep.
So, it's like I say, I'm a John Williams fan, by the way, if you haven't perceived this by me gushing on about him, and it's going to become even more noticeable as we get to the top of this list. But the first time I saw Jurassic Park, my eyes just about popped out. And I realize now that it had a lot to do with the way that scene was presented. And I'll just encapsulate it quickly in case there is somebody on Earth that hasn't seen the movie. They're pulling up in front of where they're going to see the dinosaur for the first time. And the actor and actresses, their mouths hang open. And the one guy sort of takes his glasses off. He can't believe it, what he's about to see. And then, ba-da-da-da-da. And of course, it's the Brontosaurus, I believe, in that scene.
Yeah.
But it really, the acting, the music, the script, the directing, it all ties together into sort of what I would call a perfect cinematic moment.
And wouldn't it be great to kind of to know if the people that composed this stuff, because for my recent film that I did, there's definitely some times where it wasn't the first choice. Like I wrote something else and was like, yeah, and then I would listen to it more and be like, No. Wouldn't be amazing. Wouldn't it be amazing? That's kind of like talking to Paul McCartney and interviews and stuff, and hearing that a lot of his B material that he didn't use, he would give to other bands, and then they would blow up and have #1 hits, and it was
Sure.
because it was his songs. He was that
Right.
good at writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a little bit like that, where you got to wonder, like, man, I wonder if that was the first thing they wrote, or if it, something else fell by the wayside, and then they used it a little bit later. You never can tell.
Well, you can't
Anyway,
really tell. It's so difficult. Let me think of the right way to say this. I got to choose my words. It's so difficult to tell if the music was done correctly, because the only way that you can really tell is when it is done incorrectly.
yep.
So it's when you find that true synthesis, I don't know how they say, okay, this is the one, this is the perfect theme for Jurassic Park, let's say. My guess is it's probably something like,
Create.
yeah, Greed, did you say?
No. It was an ad. I was trying to make sure I have the next one queued up here.
Oh,
Gotta skip the old YouTube videos.
yeah, I didn't know if, maybe they get together and sit down and go through 3 or 4 or 5 themes and they choose one.
Yeah, for my recent film, I just the first thing that I wrote for the entire film ended up being the theme. So for me, if anybody wants to ask or find out, I not to get weird, but I feel like I channel most of the music that I write, and that does not mean that I'm sitting, in this position meditating. It just means that I'm listening and open, and then the music seems to just come through, and I just listen for what it is, and then I just play it. So
Yeah.
a lot of times I don't sit here trying to figure things out, and sometimes there's playing on an instrument to figure it out, but most of the time I just hear it, and then I just go through and create what I was hearing in my head. And with like I said, the recent theme I did, that was the first thing I heard, and then later I embellished on everything and blew it up, and then that was the theme, and everybody loved it. So you never really know. I would be interested to know how much John Williams has in the bank after all these films that he did, though.
I think he's another 300 million guy.
Wow.
I don't have the stats in front of me, but some of these fellas, they get a piece, and also, as you know, some of the soundtracks sell very
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I wonder if that still happens. I remember a couple of those. I had like the Wayne's World soundtrack. You remember buying some of those? Can that kind
Sure.
of keep taking you back to the film? There was Dumb and Dumber had a great soundtrack. There was
I bought the soundtrack to #1 on our list, and we're coming to that in a second. But I want to touch on something else you said because it was really interesting, and I thought this was an innate skill that you had, and I think it's something that you really excel at, which is the ability to convey the meaning of a piece of prose or a piece of literature or a piece of art, and to convey it musically. And what I'm referring to here is, for those of us that don't know, I'm a writer myself and I make Kickstarters. And one of the things that Sterling and I do, we collaborate on these musical theme songs. And it is no exaggeration to say that our backers love these theme songs. And they always write to me, they're like, hey, is there going to be a theme song for this one? And there is, so please stay tuned. We're going to tell you about that. But the thing that you have done really well is to, because some of the stories admittedly have some kind of what might be considered unusual themes, right? But you've always been able to find the meaning of that and to convey it in the songwriting and the production. And when you hear it, like I say, we've got a military naval theme song. We've got, I really have to recommend, so I'll put some links here at the end and you can check them out for yourself, because it's one thing to hear me sort of droning on about how much I love them, but when you hear the songs, you're going to go, wow, this guy's not messing around. He really got the meaning of it. And
Yeah.
there's very few composers, I feel, that are able to do that. And maybe one of our most successful ones, I'll just mention, we wrote the Cthulhu themed song for Russell Nolte's book, and man, it just came out great. I just love that song. It's sort of a ska slash monster mash, and
Very
it's
specific.
just hilarious and tons of fun. And man, you just really nailed that one. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, and some of these are very specific for what people were requesting and wanting, and that one in particular. Then, like, what if it had lyrics, and what if it had, and you're like, okay, Jesus. And some of these, most of these, I'll say that we've done. Are you sending me a clip on a phone of you humming something, and then I create something,
Right.
and I'm churning it out in a couple days. So that's another thing that can really teach you a lot about yourself in terms of writing and you know, channeling or whatever you're trying to do is how easily can you tap in and how easily can you churn out a product. And since I've been doing this so long and know my equipment and know my DAW, and which is your recording software, I'm able to tap in pretty quick and come up with something very quick and then churn it out. So
You know,
but yeah,
I've
Cthulhu,
loved every
ridiculous.
one of them. I've loved every
Thank
one of them, and I will tell you that I consider myself fortunate to work with you, and I'll tell you why. I worked with some really talented people, and as you know, I've been a songwriter over the years with wildly varying degrees of success, I guess you might say, is putting it mildly. But one of the things that when we make these Kickstarters now, it's one of the parts that I look forward to the most is sitting down with you and making a theme song. Well, what would a hunchbacked robot say while he was rescuing his dog? Well, it would sound like this, you know. And it's basically every time it comes out, it always exceeds my expectations. So thanks so much, man, for what you do.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
All right, so moving on to our number 3 on the top 11 list. This is one I also think that most people would know, and it's another one by John Williams, and this one is from 1980. It is the theme from Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh no, I just typed in Indiana Jones. I hope this is the right one, but it's probably the right one. You can correct me if it's not.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. So
It's gold.
oh,
That's just gold, right?
oh my God, it's so good. That's one of the films that shaped my entire me and my brother our entire childhood. We wanted to be Harrison Ford. We wanted the hat. We wanted the
Yeah.
whip. We would buy a whip and hang from a tree until it would break for, you know, within a couple
Right.
swings, and we'd be like, shit. But yeah, it was some of the best. Yeah.
And I'd like to point out too that you know, you talk about the timeless quality of music, and some of these really make a profound illustration of that because most of these are not exactly new songs. But
Yeah.
would you say that the Indiana Jones theme song is still relevant today?
Oh, dude, I have trouble stopping it there because I want to keep going because it has such a wonderful feeling to it. And yeah, I mean, you know, I hate when people try, and so they're coming out with another Indiana Jones,
Right.
and I'm sure that in somebody's mind they're going to be like, we should update it and we should make it more, you know, current or something. Don't
We'll put Lizzo on there.
don't do that. They tried to do that with the recent when they did Coming to America. Coming to America is one of the funniest and best comedies of all time. Arsenio Hall and Eddie Murphy were some of the funniest and probably still are. But they tried to do the second one and they had a story and then they waited, you know, they kept doing all this. And then they had people come in specifically to try to make it more current for the times. Why? Why would you do that? Just make. But anyway, they didn't even need to make the film. I don't need to get into all that, but still, these things don't need to be updated. Indiana Jones, all you got to do is have a guy on a hill going, and it's the best.
Right. Yeah. And it's one of the things that kind of speaks to what you said. Like, even if somebody's humming it or whistling it, it sounds heroic, right? It's, hey, I'm getting ready to have the adventure of a lifetime. That's what you feel like when you hear that theme song. And, you know, when you think about a guy like John Williams, I almost want to hear his duds. I want to hear the ones that he said, no, this one's terrible. Like, what to him is the song that was not good enough? Like, are they like you and I would probably say, well, that's awesome. How's that not good enough? But you look at his list and they're all just complete ringers, right?
Yeah. Or the kind of thing where, you know, he might have changed one note or something. Da, da,
Yeah.
do, do, or something. You're like,
Yeah. Like,
da, 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 da,
I was
da,
kind of
da,
thinking this
da.
would be a Vegas lounge version with somebody scatting over it.
Yeah. With somebody scatting over it. Yeah. Still complete ringer and absolutely great. And it's amazing how much it can just be just totally linked up with your childhood and just everything. Yeah. I mean, and every time we would play games in like at my aunt's house, we're in the pool and we were playing Indiana Jones and that theme is playing in your head. It's amazing how much it can connect with us.
Well, if you like that one, then you're going to love number 2, which is, you know, talking about your childhood and the heroic experience and the feeling like you could do anything. The tagline of this movie in 1977 was, "You'll believe a man can fly."
Right.
And I always thought when I heard the music, that statement had less to do with the special effects of the movie and
Hmm.
more to do with how heroic this theme song sounded. And
Cool.
of course, I'm referring to the John Williams theme, 1977, the theme from Superman.
All right, let me pull this up. 3-second ad. Here we go. Wait for it. All right. Very John Williams. And you hear
Yeah,
there's
that's
one
terrific,
guy in
man.
the back that
Yeah, yeah. Don't screw up. Don't screw up.
you had one thing to do.
Yeah,
So, yep. Once again, completely John Williamsy. It has that wholesome feel. I know some of these were recorded in Abbey Road Studios,
yeah,
and that's
yeah.
another reason why they have that feeling. And they have a continuous kind of thread through them that feels wholesome and feels a certain way because they all were recorded, by probably some of the same people in the same building. So, yeah, it's
Yeah,
worth.
yeah, just a terrific job, and that's one where looking back on it, I always kind of use I call it the Family Guy example, which if you talk about movie themes that have lived on to be duplicated in some kind of comedic form,
Yeah,
what that's telling you is that the elements of the theme were strong enough that it suggests that whatever they're trying to put across in the comedy. And, Superman is one of those, right? Like, I don't think there's any way to hear that theme song and not immediately think, man, I can fly. I'm a hero, you know?
yeah, and not think about the symbol on the chest. Yeah, all of it, and not to mention, we grew up with Christopher Reeves. Is that how you say his?
Yeah, yeah, Christopher
We
Reeve.
haven't. Yeah, Christopher Reeve. Yeah, we grew up with him in those films, and nowadays it's definitely a lot different. And I don't know, it's all linked up with the Marvel things and all those, which everybody loves to bitch about and complain about and love
Right, right.
hate on. But back then, it was just, once again, it was more kind of wholesome, family oriented. It had a great warmth to it. Now everything is, how many things did they blow up in the film? And
Right. It's a little bit more of a jaded approach, I think, to modern filmmaking. And by the way, and I know you're on board with this, we try to really focus on, and I think we've done a good job here. We focus on the things that we love. And what I'd like to tell our viewers, if there's any of these that you're not familiar with, man, please check them out. And we love to talk about it and chat about it. And if you have differing opinions, we want to talk about that too. And we're taking great pains to avoid the trap, which I see so many fall into, which is the thing that really sucks about X is Y. And I'm not sure that really. And by the way, if somebody wants to do that, man, God bless you. That's my hat's off to you, and you may do what you wish. But for myself, that isn't really the way I want to proceed with my projects and with the way that we do things. That what we're doing is we're celebrating, see, the things that we love, and I'm hoping that it's going to be more about pulling people in rather than pushing people away. And look, I agree with you. I think tons of things suck, but I'm just not sure my opinion is really so relevant on some of those. And so I've tried to sort of formulate this experience based on things that we can celebrate together. And I'm really grateful to have you doing it with me, Sterling.
right on, man. And now we get to number one, right?
Yeah, number one. I'll tell you what, you want to introduce this one?
Well, I think most people know what's coming, and this is something that's so celebrated in our culture that it has so many things branched off in so many directions, and comics and comedy stuff that, once again, we're talking about Family Guy. There's so
Yeah.
much stuff that they've done with it.
Yep.
There's just cartoons. There's any other character. They can put a character in something and put the same clothes on it and be like, this is another faction of that. So for number one here, we have the Star Wars theme song, which is once again a John Williams thing. I'll pull it up here. We all know it. We could all probably hum pretty much the whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's definitely worth jumping back into here and listening to. God.
Oh, yeah. So good.
One of the most iconic things ever. To write something like that and have it stand, it's just absolutely astounding. And I'm not trying to just blow smoke around. Like, it just really is like the feeling you get when you hear that is so it's
Yeah.
just so you've heard it so many times, and the nostalgia is so powerful that if they fart out another Star Wars film and it's not that great, all you have to hear is that, and R2D2 go and you're just like,
You're
oh,
totally, it reels you right
yeah,
in. And I'm
yep,
even,
yep,
I'm older than a pile of dirt, as many of our viewers know, and I can tell you that I stood in line to see this new movie in 1977.
yeah,
And at the time, we didn't really know what it was going to be, right? Now, it had been marketed. They did marketing in those days. And the thing that I remember the most was there was a magazine called People Magazine. I think it might still be around. But it would have the latest celebrities and, Olivia Newton-John, and they had a whole thing on Grease and John Travolta. And not really my magazine, but one month they had C-3PO on the cover. And it was him
yeah,
crossing the desert, and he was kind of dirty and oily, which one of the things that was new, of course, in the Star Wars universe, the items all looked kind of used and lived in, which
yeah.
added to the reality of it. But I can remember going to my brother and being like, look at this People magazine. There's a robot on the cover. Like, I don't know if you can imagine how cool that is for a 12-year-old kid. Like,
Oh
in
yeah,
those days, there weren't magazines with robots and stuff like that. For a fix like that, you had to go to the comics, which of course I love those too. But then
yeah,
you go to see the movie, and of course you sit down and it's dark. And how does it start? It's the scroll and the theme song. And
yeah,
we were all instantly hooked. We were instantly hooked. And I would say that out of all the themes that we discussed, which are all stellar, that is the one that has not only stood the test of time, but prove that even hearing just a couple of bars of it can take you right back to that day sitting in a darkened theater in 1977 getting ready to experience magic. And
yeah.
it's my favorite. I don't mind. I'll tell anybody that will listen to me. It's my favorite. And I like it so much. I even like, there's a lot of people that love to hate on the new movies and they want to complain about this or that and what they've done with it. But I'm just grateful that there's more Star Wars stuff coming out. And one of my favorites was this movie called Rogue One, which is sort of like a prequel, or they call it Star Wars 3.5. And they sort of used the theme songs. It's sort of like a slightly reworked version, like we were saying. And they tweaked it just enough so, oh, this is going to become the main theme. And what they did is really cool. I did look this up, and that's called, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. Please correct me if in the comments if I blow this, but that's a leitmotif. And the leitmotif of Rogue One, man, it is just killer. So if you have a chance, or if you haven't seen Rogue One, please check that one out, because it's got all the elements of all the things that we love kind of wrapped up into a more modern package.
Yeah. So I wanted to say about this score in particular, when I'm teaching, I also teach people how to sing. When I'm teaching people how to sing and they're having trouble with pitch, the Star Wars theme song is so iconic and so ingrained in people that if I go and I just play a first and a fifth, most people be like, "Oh yeah, that's the Star Wars theme song."
Yeah, sure.
So if I play the first and a fourth, we know that's the wedding song. So you
Yep.
remember that right there as a fourth. But all I got to do is play a root and a fifth, and most people are like, "Oh yeah, start 2 notes," and most people are like,
Right, right. Yeah, yeah.
That's amazing, and
Yeah,
that's amazing to have something that ingrained in your head. So
it really is. That kind of proves your point from earlier too, that it's all about the feel, right? Like you don't necessarily, like, there's a mechanical reason why we would know this, but the truth is most people can just sort of feel that in their heart.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So can we bring up before we end? Can we bring up one song that you did not put on the list that I
Yes.
think should have been on the list? I
Yes,
don't know the
please.
composer, but I remember it so much in my childhood, and I brought up Eddie Murphy, the Beverly Hills Cop theme song. I should bring it up,
Yeah.
but is something that everybody knows. Beverly Hills Cop theme song, and do you know it off the top of your head?
I know it's like a play it for us. I do know it, but I can't hum it right now.
Dun, 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 dun,
Dun,
dun,
dun, dun,
dun,
dun,
dun.
dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
Yep. So I think it's one of these really iconic things, and it totally doesn't have the horns. It doesn't have all these things that these kind of typical epic kind of things have. But and I don't mean to end on that after we just ended on number one being that, but
Go for
still,
it, man.
you got to admit that a lot of people know this.
Oh,
So,
sure.
and if you have a keyboard or a synthesizer that has a similar noise, most people are gonna be like, Oh yeah, that sounds like this. Bum, bum, bum. Here, I'll skip ahead. And one of my favorites in Family Guy, where they had Peter dancing to this, and he was going.
The Family Guy test. The Family Guy test. I'm telling
Yep.
you, every time it proves the cultural relevancy, which I would have said the generation just a hair before that, it would have been The Simpsons that did the same thing. And if you're going back quite a way with people that are animation fans, of course, to my generation, you know, Bugs Bunny and the Looney Tunes did a lot of that, which is the reason why I know some of the opera songs.
Yep. That was one of my favorite things growing up. Still might be one of my favorite things in
Yeah,
the
man,
universe is
maybe me
Looney
too.
Tunes. Oh, it's the best.
And by the way, as long as we're talking about the also rans and the ones that didn't make the list, I gotta say somebody's gonna say the Dum Dum, the Jaws theme.
Yeah.
You know, it's
You
like
did bring that up. Yep.
I
It
will
was
tell
one of
you,
those things where. Go ahead.
Jaws almost made the list, right? Like I almost felt bad cutting it, but it was already I had John Williams amply represented on the list. So
Yeah, it's something that I think it's something that everybody kind of knows, but it didn't have that strong kind of through line where people remember the other notes. I do a
yeah,
little bit.
exactly.
Yeah. We all remember the feeling of it and the dun 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 dun, and you know, anybody that's gotten into a pool and been afraid of sharks and thought that one was chasing them has probably heard the dun 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 dun. But yeah, I didn't. Yeah, diddle-oo, diddle-oo. I didn't remember a lot of the other notation from it, so it just didn't have the same kind of iconic through line through. So
Yeah. Maybe we'll save Beverly Hills Cop and Jaws for part 2 if we ever do this list again.
yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of other ones that we're forgetting that we could definitely throw in there. So
Yeah. Well, hey man, this was fun making this list. And before we wrap things up, the first thing I want to say thanks so much for coming and helping us to make this list. It was really fun, and of course, I love talking to you. For those that don't know, I'm pretty close friends with Sterling. I think he's one of my greatest friends on the planet, and we talk about this stuff when we're not on camera. So this is just a regular day for us. But tell us a little bit about where we can find you and follow your work.
So my name's Sterling R. Jackson. You can pretty much find me by just typing that into Google or whatever. You'll see me in all kinds of different bands. I'm a vocalist, guitarist, drummer, all kinds of different things. But mostly hang out on YouTube. I started teaching lessons recently, so you'll see me teaching people how to sing and how to sing correctly and how to fix their singing, on and on. And you'll see me singing all kinds of things throughout the years and playing songs. Like I said, I'm in a bunch of bands. One of my bands is Vegas Nerve. That's got Doc Coyle from Bad Wolves in it. I just joined another band with the drummer from a band called Nothing More. I just joined another band with the bass player from A Perfect Circle. So definitely always moving towards music in every way that I can, and making more and more music. And then yeah, I just finished up a film. That's just a simple indie Christmas film, but it's called Wonderful Time of Year. I get it confused because they change the names of these sometimes. You'll work on it for months and then they're like, hey, we changed it. And you're like, oh, okay. So it was called Reason for the Season, and now it's called Wonderful Time of Year. But anyway, that's got Tom Arnold in it, and that was a really wonderful experience for me to be able to write, and really get into the film thing and do all that kind of stuff. So anyway, yeah.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And I tell you, I'm really looking forward to it. And as you know, I can say without exaggeration, I loved some of the material from your prior band, Vegas Nerve in particular. So,
Thanks.
viewers, I got to recommend you check this out. You know, I don't exaggerate about things very often, but it's definitely some of the stronger material of recent memory. I really look forward to seeing the new stuff, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you having me on here. It's always good talking to you. We talk all the time, but so it feels a little strange to be like, man, it's so good seeing you. But I'll probably talk to you. I'll probably talk to you tonight.
Yeah. Well, this was great, man. I had a lot of fun with this one. And as for myself, in closing, I'm Timothy Fling. I'm a writer and creator. I'm hoping that people will follow my latest Kickstarter project, which is Water Wars 2288. We've got the 4th volume launching here on October 15th. And best of all, it's going to feature a new theme song with Sterling R. Jackson. And if it's anything like the others, it's going to be just amazing. And I can't say it strongly enough. It's been a real pleasure working with you over the years, and I value your friendship most highly.
Same, man. I appreciate you. Thanks very much. This was fun, and I'll be talking to you soon.
All right. See you, everybody.